Greetings, fellow Homo sapiens. I'm here today with Brad Kilpatrick. Brad Kilpatrick is a percussionist, drummer, producer, engineer, generally musician extraordinaire, and soon-to-be dad. Brad, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you after a very long time. So I was thinking about what to ask you, like, on the way over here. Normally I'd want to, update myself on, the kind of work my guest has been doing. But I've known you for, a really long time, and it's kind of a weird thing because known you for ages, but I, don't really know you. It's not like we hang out all the time or anything like that. We go way back, probably with junior high school. And so I was kind of contemplating on the way over here the notion of all the work you've done. You kind of, out of our cohort back in St. John's, you came out of the gate pretty hard, doing amazing work from an early stage. And then I was thinking about the early shows back in the day that I remember seeing you in, that music enrichment camp that we met at way back in the day, and just sort of juxtaposing the weird references I could throw at you versus the proper references that anybody who would be interviewing an accomplished musician such as yourself should be. And so the first question that kind of leads me to ponder is the difference between work that you are known for and the work that you are personally proud of or feel a sense of gratification from. What's the intersection between those two things for you? And have you experienced any dissonance at all, if any, over the years from those two kind of categories?
Wow, great question. Heavy question.
Just getting things started off here on a light note here.
That's good. I would say I feel very fortunate that I think most of what I have done, if I'm known for anything, I feel like most of the things that I have done are things that I feel connected to or proud of in one way or another. But now that's probably as much because of my own personality as anything else. I don't have a good poker face. So if I'm not feeling something, I'm not going to be good at pulling it off. And
right.
I think that has happened a couple of times where I've maybe agreed to do something that for one reason or another felt like something that I could do or that I should do. Mm-hmm. And then I got into it and maybe felt like, you know what? I was wrong. I'm going to have to get myself out of this one way or another. Mm-hmm. I've been playing with Hawksley Workman for almost 15 years, and that's probably what has definitely been the biggest chunk of work, and most of the things that I've come into have come from that. I learned to engineer because of working with him. We were working on a Christmas record together 10 years ago, and
can I just interrupt you for a second? Put a pin in that exact thought. Just because you said Christmas record. Somebody literally asked me yesterday if I would ever produce a Christmas record, and I think that's just a funny thought and a funny question to ask a musician and or producer. Anyway, go on.
Well, and you have to make them in July is the thing too, right? So when we made this one, we put up a Christmas tree, but it was 35 degrees.
You guys
in the
put up a tree, yeah?
Yeah,
great.
So yeah, I can't remember what the exact circumstances were. We were making this record. We had 3 or 4 days, and then we didn't get finished everything we had intended to do. And Stu, the engineer, Stu Crooks, couldn't be there for the remainder of the session. And so Hawksley kind of knows how to engineer, and I had no idea. And we were also making this record on tape, on a Studer tape machine.
Okay.
So my first experience learning was that, on all analog gear. Obviously, it went into a computer after the fact, but just the whole thing was made without looking at a computer screen, and that was a real kick that Hawksley was on for a while. So, with working on stuff with him and with Stu teaching me a lot of stuff, I started engineering. So, anyway. Back to your original question, I've done a bunch of stuff that's kind of connected to Hawk in one way or another, engineering projects, like when he was producing Sarah Celine songs for one of her last records, maybe her last record, I'm not sure at this point. But like I got to work on that. I'm very proud of that. I met the guitar player Kevin Bright through working with Hawksley, and I wound up playing vibes with Kevin a lot for this project of his for the last few years. So there's been a lot of things that have come out of that, and it, you know, it's I'm not afraid to say that it, like playing with Hawksley was the literal goal I had when I moved to Toronto because I was a fan. Yeah. And so I think I had two like I had set two goals for myself. My 5-year plan was to play with Hawksley and to like buy a new used car in.
Like, were you successful in your second goal?
I was, yeah.
Well, then aced.
Yeah.
Moved to Toronto, aced.
Yeah.
That's a lot smoother than most folks that move over here for our purposes. So
I was very lucky. I mean, so I'm very proud of all the work I've done with him. Most of the things that I think, you know, people might know that I've done are things like that. Like the stint I had in Holy Fuck was really fun.
I was just gonna say,
and that like, kind of put me on the map. That's where the first thing I did when I got to Toronto.
Yeah, well, on my way over, not just on my way over here, just like thinking about our conversation today, comparing like obscure St. John's references versus things I know that I like really resonate with me that you've done. Holy Fuck is like is very much up there.
Yeah, that was cool. It was a fun ride. I definitely did the most international travel that, like, in a short period of time that I've ever done with them, and like the most van touring that I've ever done with them. It was fun. It was like, it feels like a very innocent thing. Like I remember one of I think the first thing I did with them after I had an audition at the Rehearsal Factory on Geary.
Oh yeah, that old place.
I think the audition was on like a Wednesday, and on Friday there was a gig in Hamilton. And at that point, that band had they had a few songs, but a lot of it was just like improvising.
Yeah,
which was up my alley. I was game for that. But I think I think either the day of that gig or the day before. So after I did the audition and they hired me or whatever, or decided I'm going to be in the band. We had to do a remix of that MIA song that became huge, but it was like before it was known. I remember we made this remix that I don't know if it ever went anywhere, or I can't remember what happened to it, but it seems so silly in retrospect because the remix that we did, which is cool, but it doesn't have the hook in it because we didn't we were like, what is it like? What are the things to latch onto in this song? And it hadn't been on the radio a million times yet. So like all that, like all those gun sounds and stuff, like none of that is in the remix that we did. We just like played like fast, like East Coast rock drums and bass over the song and chopped up the vocal and stuff.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's how it's done. That's how that's how a remix should be, as far as I'm concerned. So that's cool. Glad to hear that little bit of insight on Holy Fuck. Actually, can you tell me? I mean, how long were you with them?
It's not linear.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what if I'm trying to recollect from even me just following your stuff over the years. But like I'm immediately now curious as to what that process might have been like with that band.
Well, so I moved to Toronto in like September 1st, 2007. They were looking for a drummer for a bunch of fall dates because it was kind of a revolving door rhythm section situation there for a long time. And I guess, so I moved to town. My friend Judd Haynes, who is a great graphic designer, who was originally the bass player in Winter Sleep from Halifax. He knew Brian Borchard very well from Holy Fuck, and just Judd knew that they were looking for a drummer and knew that I was moving to town. Thought it would be a good fit, so he kind of suggested the connection. And then it also so happened that the bass player who was playing with Holy Fuck at the time and who has played with them consistently since is this guy Matt McQuaid from PEI, who I had played with a bunch with Mark Bragg from Newfoundland, touring around the East Coast and stuff. So we had an existing relationship. Again, so this is like one of those Toronto stories that's like none of the people involved in this story are from Toronto, but we all kind of like
it's a classic Toronto story. I mean, that's really cool. What I meant by process was more just like that band. The music is just so unique. Like what was the process like in coming up with that music? Like
sure. Sorry.
Like I get the sense when I listen to Holy Fuck that the band itself, whether it's stated explicitly or not, has a particular ethos or approach. Otherwise, you wouldn't get that kind of a sound. So maybe that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, how do you do that type of thing?
So, I mean, I'll answer with the caveat that I haven't played in the band in almost 10 years probably at this point. Yeah. But I still play with Brian a lot, like the last couple of Dusted things that he's done, I've been involved with. So I still think I have a bit of an idea. But from my experience being in the studio and playing live with them, it's basically like making electronic music without computers. So, although computers are definitely involved in like editing and stuff after the fact, but all the sounds were coming out of like, Casio SK1s and like using just toys and weird like found like speak and spells, whatever, like all kinds of stuff that would be the weird like genesis of a song. So it might have like a loop in it that would be what we would play to and build on, or it might have like just a weird sound that could be manipulated some way. So there'd be lots of writing around some kind of like device.
Oh, right.
I think later on, like the last time that I played with them, they had gotten it to a point just because traveling became really cumbersome because you'd have to take like these things are also all old and they're toys, so they break.
Yeah.
So it had gotten to a point where they had just eventually loaded a bunch of those sounds into a sampler.
Yep. Because
it is a much cleaner way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But still using all those sounds. So sometimes there would be an obvious like song structure. Sometimes it would just be jams based around this thing, and then like the version that made it to a record of any given song may or may not be what got played live. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like there was one song I remember recording it 2 or 3 different times, and then by the time it made it onto a record, it had been recorded with like at least 2 other drummers, and
interesting, and
sounded completely different from the way that it started. But it was the same song, but it was not, And then like there was also no real vocals. There's still not like in a traditional sense, but like there were they weren't even doing as much kind of like singing into guitar pedals as they do now.
Right.
But yeah, very, very much like improvising to find something as opposed to like no one's sitting down with a guitar and writing writing those songs. Like it's kind of like a sonic impetus, and then let's improvise around it and kind of come up with something.
Yeah, cool. I'm thanks for that insight. I was always kind of curious, so it's good to hear it from you. Just to cover the range of, because you're a percussionist, so like to cover the range of actual instruments you play outside of the drum kit. You mentioned vibes. What do I see over? I mean, these aren't necessarily your things, but I suppose you can play a huge range of percussive instruments other than the drums, and you're trained as a percussionist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you talk a bit more about that range before maybe you start focusing on the drums?
Sure. I mean, when I was in university, so we met at this enrichment camp when we were kids, like whatever, junior high. I had it in my head then that I was like going to graduate high school, going to go to Memorial, going to do a Bachelor of Music in Percussion Performance. Yeah. And I was like that. And I knew what that meant because I was such a nerd at that point that I was taking lessons with or I think I started taking lessons with Dave Humphrey after that enrichment thing that we did. One of the guys that taught it, and I really connected to playing timpani, like playing timpani in an orchestra. I definitely envisioned that as a career path at one point.
Specifically the timpani?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell me maybe a little bit about what about the timpani maybe resonates, no pun intended, more than...
That's a good one. It's kind of the most... In the orchestra, it's kind of like playing the drum set because you control... to a large degree, the dynamic and the like color of the sound of the orchestra. Like it can be the loudest thing on stage,
Yeah.
Or not. It can be very, very subtle. And then there's also like a harmonic element to it, right? Because it's pitched. So there's just something about it that is very powerful.
Yeah.
And it's also Rob Power, my teacher at MUN, made this observation about why he suspected that I connected to it as well as drum set, is that it's they're both solitary roles. There's sometimes there might be two timpanists in an orchestra at the same time, but very rarely. Like there's usually only one drummer and there's usually only one timpanist.
Yeah.
Whereas other instruments you're kind of playing more as a section, but when you're playing drum set or you're playing timpani, you're effectively a soloist. Like you get to dictate how it's going to go. And so it's very expressive.
Yeah.
And I think that it's all of those things. And I still love that instrument. I don't own timpani of my own, but whenever I get an opportunity, like there's a few orchestras in town that I'm on the call list for, and so I'll get to go and play maybe 3-4 times a year, in the before times.
Oh yeah.
And I still get a lot out of it. And I think that I bring it back to then like what I do on the drums, because it teaches you a lot about tone. Like you hit that instrument wrong and it sounds awful. So yeah, that's definitely was my first love, and like I said, I thought that I was going to go down that road, kind of until later in university, when it became more clear to me that I think drum set was going to be the thing. Other than that, like anything in the orchestral section, like playing snare drum or cymbals or whatever is fun, and I like playing vibes. I'm not a huge, like some people are very, very into the marimba, like that's kind of the classic. Like if you want to be a percussion soloist, you learn to play the marimba and
why is that more so than the vibraphone, or like is it just? I should say, so as a guy who's doing music production these days, and I'm usually loading up these sounds in Contact, right? Because you work and where I'm going to find a real one of these things. They like to me. Even though I've played, just marginally, but I've had experience like the real thing. But they're just different colors. So that's how I'm thinking about it, and I'm inputting it the same damn way. So from your point of view as a percussionist, and also just having this, like, why is the marimba such a more popular choice than the xylophone or the vibes, or is that not even? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, no, it totally does. Xylophone is.
I love it.
Xylophone you should have to have a license to play xylophone.
That's great.
Xylophone can be a very, very terrible sounding instrument because it's so bright and loud and cutting, and people who make it sound great make it sound great, but that's rare. It doesn't blend with anything. Like it's just kind of like you're either playing like novelty ragtime stuff or like the Simpsons. Like unless you're playing in a Danny Elfman piece, basically, right. I'm not interested in hearing xylophone. Vibes is just a beautiful sounding instrument. They blend, but they can also stand out. They're it's such a beautiful texture. It's kind of in the same realm, or it's adjacent to like electric piano because of the fans, and yeah, like that's a beautiful instrument. Why the marimba is more of a like classic percussion soloist instrument is, I think, probably just because it's bigger range. So vibraphone has 3-octave range, the real thing. Right. I'm sure that the samples have an extended range.
Well, that's why it's these subtleties that are lost on a fellow like me, right? That's why.
Marimba has a 5-octave range.
Okay, well that'll do it. That's a big difference for sure.
And so you can play more notes. So you can play like transcriptions of like cello music and things like that you can't do on the vibraphone because there's not enough notes.
Right.
So I think that's got a lot to do with it. But it's I'm definitely not a marimba player.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to figure out whether I should ask you about drums or more about this world, because I don't have a lot of experience with it. Like, and you mentioned being on the call list for a few orchestras, and that kind of prompted me to think, like, what types of differences would you find in that world versus, like, say, the music scene, the rock scene, or like, what can you shed some light on that maybe?
Yeah, it's completely different in my view, and that has a lot to do with why I think I'm not in it more. Okay. It's extremely competitive if you want, like, because the stuff I'm doing is basically like scraps, like $200 gigs that are like pickup gigs, like meaning like you're on there's usually a personnel manager or a contractor for some of these smaller like C-level orchestras, because there's, like your Toronto Symphony has a core membership that are paid a salary, that are paid very well, and that like then if they need extra players, they'll contract those extra players for a gig. I've never played with the Toronto Symphony. Then there's a few other like high level orchestras in town, and then there's a lot of kind of like just below that level, like community orchestras that need to hire professional players to play more like demanding work, or like a lot of choirs that put together an orchestra just for a concert here or there. Like that's the kind of stuff that I get called to do. Right. And that is very much just you get your name on the list once, and then you just be available when they call. And it's really just someone calling and saying, can you do it? It's got nothing to do usually with, I think you'd have to be a pretty big pain in the ass to like not get called back. Whereas in like rock and pop, if you're even a little bit of a pain in the ass, usually it's like you'll get weeded out of a situation more quickly, which I think is fair. Yep. Classical music is, I have so many thoughts about it, but it like, if you go to music school at this point in 2021 to get a classical music degree, you're effectively training for a job market that doesn't exist. Yeah. Because there are fewer and fewer orchestras, and if like I said, like if you're a timpani player, there's one timpanist in an orchestra, sometimes two. Someone gets that job, they hang on to that job for 30 years. Yeah. So, hundreds, if not thousands of people graduate from music school every year. Like, where are the jobs that they're going to get? So there's a lot of bitterness and resentment, in my experience, amongst the people that feel like they're due something, And that's a bummer. And I didn't want that to be me. And also, like, I will freely admit that I didn't have the discipline or the skill in some level to like get to win an audition. And but I did have the self-awareness, I think, to recognize that. And after a teacher being very encouraging, John Wire, that guy on the wall behind me, he just told me, like, you're a drum set player, and that meant a lot. So I took that to heart. But the classical thing, I think it's very, very competitive, and I understand why. But that doesn't necessarily, like, I wouldn't say that there's a community there either. I think that there's because of that competitiveness. Now I'll say, like, I know lots of percussionists in town, and there are exceptions. Like I have a group of half a dozen people that I know really well who like some of whom play with the Toronto Symphony and some of whom play with the ballet and stuff. Like there are, there's good people everywhere. But,
of course,
but that's maybe not the majority sometimes.
Well, what you're saying is really interesting to me because if I think about the circumstances that would like maybe again knowing nothing about it, just listening to you talk about it, the circumstances that would govern that scene, or if you can call it that, the parameters, like if there's a few amount of slots in something like the TSO, you're looking for virtuosos. Yep. And it's Toronto, like it's the biggest city in the country. It's a global city, so you're looking for world-class players. And I would want you to correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're aiming to be an orchestral musician in that world, you're getting scores. So like where there is creativity in the expression and the interpretation of that music, but it also has to be very much in sync with the conductor, and which is great. I mean, in terms of what it is. So the player or the artist also does not have this other way to bypass. It's just virtuoso, virtuoso, virtuoso. I can't show you this like weird experimental record I made and use that to get further in that stream. So, like in the music I've been doing and producing, whether it's like pop or rock or whatever, I always have the ability to just make something strange, and sometimes like off to the side as a side project, and that will help. Maybe that will help as much as it hinders me to get a new project. Right? Like sometimes somebody will maybe have only heard the strange, weird thing I made and be like, "This guy is strange. I don't want to talk to him or work with him." But then other times, an artist will be like, "Oh, I know you can make this record that sounds like this, but also you have all these weird ideas that I need to like." We need to kind of spice this up, like, please,
Yeah.
So, like, that can work for me in this environment because it's that. But in a virtuoso situation, limited number of seats, you can see how a lot of tension and resentments would build up over time. They happen even in the rock and pop scene as well. So I would imagine it'd be exacerbated under those circumstances.
Yeah, like it's just higher stakes, right? Because you're talking about like a 6-figure job. It's very much like a job.
Yeah.
And you have it for if you win tenure, it's called, like you have that job for life and until you retire. And there's like not many musicians get something like that.
Yeah.
So I get it. I understand all the reasons for it. But yeah, what you're talking about is like you have to. So particularly if you're a percussionist and you want to audition for one of those jobs, it means buying all the instruments shedding on all of them a list of what's called excerpts. So that's like all of the hardest parts from all of the most famous pieces that the orchestra will play.
Okay.
So, and you have to know them backwards and forwards, basically.
And as a percussionist, I mean, the amount of things you have to accumulate. Yeah. Right. That's something else.
Yeah. And so then you also you don't get to decide where you live. If you want to win one of those jobs, you got to get on a plane and go to Australia and audition in Melbourne, or you have to go to, the States or Europe, wherever it's going to be, Malaysia. Like and if you win that job, then you live there.
Yep.
And that's not, that really doesn't appeal to me at almost 40. Like but it didn't even appeal to me at 20, you know. Yeah. I kind of wanted to have a little bit of say in that. So I can understand like anyone feeling a sense of frustration in that. There's lots of people in that scene, and I don't want to paint a picture of like there's not like creatives who do things outside of it, like because there definitely are.
I would imagine you'd have to have some outlets outside of it.
Yeah.
Dabble in other adjacent worlds.
Yeah, for sure. And some people are able to do both. Like there are classical musicians who can sit down and play jazz or like play on a rock gig and hold their own. It's maybe more the exception than the rule, but it does happen, Yeah. It's interesting though. It's like there's not much crossover, which kind of I always think about this. A friend of mine who I respect and admire very, very much gave me what I think is the worst piece of advice I ever got given before I moved to Toronto, which was like, pick what lane you want to be in and stay in it, because like people will people will judge you if they think you're not committed to your aesthetic or whatever, which is totally bullshit.
I've been working against that advice for like all my adult life
Because it's totally bullshit. Like so you're on your last episode, like talking about like there's not enough of a scene. Like people, if you are playing in a noise band and then you're playing in an orchestra and then you're playing jazz, no one is going to all three of those things. No one knows or cares if you do all of that. All that matters is if you're good and genuine when you're doing the thing that you're doing.
The genuine part is a huge part of it.
Yeah,
took me so long to realize that part. I mean, it's my job as a producer is to, when I'm working with someone, to get that genuine. Obviously, the good part is very important as well, but the genuine is important. Yeah. So like moving over to the drums. You said you kind of had your trial by fire working with Hawksley Workman on that Christmas album in terms of engineering.
Yeah.
And now you're here in this space, and I've seen on Instagram from time to time you're posting what you're working on. God, there's so much I want to ask you. Before I even ask you about the types of things you're working on, let's get a little bit dorky and technical and maybe talk about some approaches, like maybe not so much in a straight up technical explanation of how you tune your drums, but an explanation with an ear towards your aesthetic. How, like, your philosophy towards the range of drum sounds you get, whether it's how you're tuning them, how you're dampening them, choice of cymbals.
Okay, so I mean, it largely has to do with what I hear in the context of like whatever it is I'm working on. But by virtue of the type of stuff that I play most, like kind of folky or rootsy, like pop or rock stuff, like it generally, and I am not alone in this. It is definitely something of like the kind of zeitgeisty drum thing at the moment, but like earthy, kind of dark. What's another tag I can put on that? Just like these really kind of earthy, warm. There we go.
For sure.
Yeah, like those are the things that really that's where I feel like, again, going back to timpani, like I want to hear some tone, even if it's like even if it's a very short note, like a dead snare drum, a low tuned dead snare drum should still have like body. And so I just like to try and get the tone right for the way that I hear the drums fitting into a song. Like I think I come at it like I'm a big record nerd. Like I just like listening to music, and so whenever I get sent a song to play on, or if I'm listening to something in the studio that I'm going to play on, I'm trying to listen to it the way that I would be listening to it if I were putting on a record at home. Like, what do I like? Does this feel like a cohesive thing? Like, is what I'm, or is that even the goal? Like, but if it is, do the drum sounds that I'm choosing, do they sound, or do they feel like they belong in that song? Do they belong in that space? Are they of the same space? Like,
those are all very good questions. I'm glad you said that. It sounds, I think some drummers and or listeners who have some experience in this, that could sound like, of course, but I think there are a lot of drummers that don't necessarily put that thought into. Oh yeah, I know there are. This is how I tune my drums. I approximately, and let's give her. And working with a drummer that has an ear towards these things is like a producer's dream, right? I can rely on you and work with you to be like, well, this is the kind of tone we need, and I can rely on you to have some, not just to be amenable to that, but to have some insight into how we can get that tone. Here's how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Sometimes it's verbal. Sometimes it's like, especially since I've been in here. I've done one full length record since I moved into this space in April. There's been other like songs that I've been working on, but they've been more kind of like isolated things here and there. But the one full length record that I did, like the producer, everyone's working remotely, but he would send mock up drums for everything. And so as a starting point, I would ask him like, are these the are you thinking at least sonically? Because I'll play the part the way that you've presented it, and then I'll also like play it the way that I hear it if they're different.
Yeah.
But
which is very appreciated that you're doing that. Trust me, I would very much appreciate that. So
well, it makes sense, and it's if you've got the luxury of having a space like I have, like it's easy enough to do.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason for me to not, because the actual playing of the song is usually the thing that takes the least amount of time. You know, it's like getting sounds that might take a few hours, but playing the song, like very rarely should it take more than 20 minutes. If it's
that's something to really pause on, that people should realize that, I mean, a guy at your level, the playing is quick. It's this, all that, you said, you didn't just say an hour, you said maybe a couple hours, right?
To get the sound?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, the drum kit just to get the sound. I mean, is that including your mics are basically set up. Are they? I mean, are you swapping out mics? Is that including all of that business, or are you really just working on those tones?
I don't very much swap out mics because I still am not I don't have a huge mic locker. So I basically have what I have. I might change overheads if I really wanted. I'm generally, like I said, I'm using ribbons as overheads. But if it's something that demands a brighter sound, then I'll swap those out. I'll change mic positions a lot, though. Okay. Like I definitely don't just sit down.
That's part of the tone capturing is the mic positions for you. So that's also, that's a good amount of thoroughness between getting the drums sounding good and it's obvious, but in a lot of other situations, a separate guy will come in and do those things for you. So it's like if someone's hiring you, the fact that you're putting in all that detail, that's
and I think one of the advantages to the remote recording that everyone has gotten used to now is that like I only have to worry about my own time. And I'm not gonna drive myself crazy chasing something, but like going back to how I said I don't have a good poker face. I also don't want to, as a result of that, I don't want to put my name on something that I'm not like 100% behind. Yeah. So if I have the time and I've got like a pile of drums here, like I'll try all the snare drums until I find the one that I feel like is the right one for the tune, or I'll swap out kick drums or take the front head off, or like change the dampening or change the size of the toms I'm using or whatever. Like I was saying, like if a producer sends me a demo drum thing and says that's the kind of sound they hear, then I'll use that as a starting point. Like if it's a bright, ringy snare drum, which is not often the case lately, but it was the case for a few things I was working on back in April, May, like really kind of like loud, bright, ringy snare drum.
Full nu metal vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, like and those sounds, I think part of the reason that they're maybe not fashionable is because they are harder to do. Yeah. Like if stuff is ringy,
if you don't get that tone, if you don't figure that out properly, that pitch, that particular ring, if you don't figure that one out properly, it could be like a semitone off from like the key of the song or whatever.
And it's harder to do in smaller spaces too. Like you need kind of high ceilings to have a drum tuned up high. I think like when I was in my house doing drums for people, I could never do that. Like that's one of the things I was saying, kind of when you came in here, is that I can get away with things in here that I couldn't do in an 8-foot ceiling room in my basement. So yeah, I mean, I think I don't like some people obsess about tuning the toms to the key of the song. I don't do that. I just try and make sure that they don't clash with anything and that they sound good in the song in some kind of way. Like it depends on so many things, like how thick is the mid-range of the song already, Right. And sometimes you don't know, because sometimes you're getting something before it's built up, and it might just be like a scratch guitar and a vocal that you're playing to. Sometimes I have one person who often sends me things like that are basically done, and sometimes there's no click, and it's like that's an entirely different set of challenges. It's like, okay, now I have a picture of what the mix sounds like, so I know what the drums should sound like. But like, do I follow this guitar that drifts this way, or do I follow that guitar that drifts the other way?
Like
or,
not even recorded to a click.
Sometimes not, or like
just free time.
Or like recorded to a click, but then it's been through a few different DAWs, and they've like not like. They didn't write down what tempo it was at, and then every time they bounce it out, they bounce it out from a different zero, and I'm like, okay, like you say it's this tempo, I can't make it fit on the grid, but you just make it work. Like it is a challenge to do that, but it's not impossible, and it has its like not everything needs to be to a click.
Yeah,
but
has its own charm.
Yeah,
I'm a strong anti-click advocate outside of the recording realm for sure. I've been known to rail against people overusing clicks and backing tracks in their performances, but that's I digress. What was I going to just say? This whole idea where you're talking about getting projects from producers and the different types of things they could be giving you or not giving you, which, as a guy that wants to be good with the people I work with, I want to ask you, what's like the best case scenario versus the worst case brief you can get if someone's sending you a song or something, any type of music to work on, and they want you to record something on it. What's just the worst possible, like, lack of information / extra information that's not needed type? Like, what should I do to, like, if I'm sending you a song, what should I avoid doing such that to not fry your brain?
So sometimes I got to be careful here because I don't know who might listen to this, but I don't. So things to not do would be like, if you want to send an MP3, that's fine. I can use an MP3, and but like, send me the sample rate of your session.
Yeah.
Don't leave me guessing that. Don't send me a thing that has so many limiters on it that it's like squashed and I can't, I have to turn it down as far as the fader will go so that I can hear the drums over it. Like, there's a bunch of, like, just send like a clean wave file. If you have a drum idea, send a stem of the drum idea. Send your mix without drums and a stem of the click, or at least like it starts on, like, the file starts from 0 on the session. Here's the tempo. Like,
that starting point, getting that starting point on the bounce is a big one. I find.
It's a big one, and it's like, I'm surprised the degrees of variance that I get from people on that one, and I think it's just like, depending on how or where you got to your engineering vibe. Yep. You just don't think about it the same way.
People are coming from so many, like, the means of production are so much more accessible. So you have people that have come into it from so many different places, and then very few people have any formal training, including myself. And so then you end up developing your own processes that work, and then you send that session to somebody else, and sometimes it's a hot mess. Other times people are surprised and shocked that you were as organized as you were with the brief that you sent them. Any totally wacky requests you get that you might feel like worth mentioning, or
no, I mean, everything is usually pretty doable. The things that are helpful on top of just like what you're sending are like some kind of context, like like what is going on, like are there any tunes that are references sonically or musically?
That's a big one. Yeah,
like, not that you're copying it, but just like to like an agreed upon language, because there's so much music, and I've listened to and I've heard lots of it, but there's lots of stuff I haven't heard. And so if you're if your goal is to reference this weird thing that I've never heard before, it'd be maybe a good idea for me to hear it, and then
good call.
Then I can try and kind of get something happening. The weirdest thing that I ever did, actually, I think the worst. I don't want to say worst, but the hardest session that I ever did, and this kind of goes to that rule of like, there's this meme that I saw going around, like, like your mixed notes from your $50 client versus mixed notes from your $5,000 client. And it's like, $5,000 client is like, sounds good, we'll go with option B. And the other one is like, a page. I did this thing. I can't even remember how it happened. It was a project studio in someone's garage years ago. They wouldn't give me the address first. Like, they were really weird about, like, I don't know if they thought I was going to come and rip them off or whatever. So I had to meet them at, like, a parking lot at a grocery store or something, and then follow them to the house that we were going to track
sketchy.
at. Yeah. And I get there, and they had sent me the demo with drums on it, and I learned the song to, like, what I thought was the normal level, and then they're like, "Okay, but yeah, you're not playing what was on the demo," and I was like, "Interesting. I'm playing drums to this song, like you." And like we had to have a bit of a back and forth. But what I finally got to is that they wanted a note for note recreation, like beat for beat, of what was recorded, just played better because they had edited it so much. So it's like if the drummer does a ghost note, they want that like they wanted like Frank Zappa level attention to detail from start to finish for like something that I think was like $100 and that I'm sure has never been heard by anybody. And so I just had to, and I'm not like, I can't be mad at that, but that was not communicated.
It's a strange request to ask of a guy like you. I mean, you're like one of the best drummers I've seen physically in my. You know what I mean? That's a fact. Like, so it's absurd that someone would, if someone's sending you a reference, I am not imagining you, fucking that up. So
it's just most people want most people want like a performance.
Yeah.
Most people are looking for like a human. Interpretation of their thing, and it's happened a couple of other times. There have been some people that I've worked on recordings with who have like such severe demoitis that they want exactly note for note.
Demoitis, good word. Yeah.
And so then what happened in this case is like I would get them to play me 4 bars. I would notate the 4 bars on the head of my snare drum.
Whoa.
I would play those 4 bars. And then they would stop. I'd listen to and write out the next 4 bars, and the whole thing just got punched in like that.
Wow.
Whereas
those music school chops coming in real handy.
I guess but if they had let me know ahead of time that that's what they wanted,
you would have just had a score for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so in cases since then, when it's properly communicated, you want it note for note. That's not a problem, but it's just like communicate that so that then. Because that is the exception. That's not the rule. Like you don't imagine when someone sends you a demo that you are going to do note for note, beat for beat. You assume, I assume that I'm going to like whatever is the main groove. Like that is going to be exactly what I play to start with. But like. Unless it's like a signature fill that gets repeated a bunch of times in what they've programmed or whatever, like, because sometimes people are just using like whatever the like Logic Magic Drummer thing, and they're not thinking about it. But sometimes they've programmed this thing in, and it's often people who aren't drummers who program very, very idiosyncratic parts that a drummer would never play.
Right. Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that can be really cool. I've had to recreate some things like that where it's like, oh, this is interesting. I would never do this, and everything about my body doing this feels wrong. But it does sound cool, and like I'm not saying there's no value in it, but it definitely is like that's part of the role, I guess, is or part of the job is just like figuring out how trying to be a bit of a mind reader and trying to like. Get something out of because people, someone might write a song and be working on that song for years before I get to it, and I might only have a relationship with it for a day. Yeah, and so I get the seriousness of that. Like I don't want to be flippant or like not give people what they want. I respect what they've done, and like I want to handle it with care. Yeah. But yeah, it's just. It's a little bit of like psychology and trying to figure out like what does this mean to you exactly? What parts of this are essential, what parts of this are like vibe. You know?
That's a good question. The wording of that. What does this mean to you? Exactly. I mean, I find myself asking the same thing as a producer when I'm working with artists to get, to make sure I get the intentionality of the thing right. So, I mean, I want to ask you about the range of kind of types of things you're working on, but before that, what was it that I just kind of came to my? Oh yeah, between the first pass of like you do the thing kind of as per the brief, and then you mentioned all right, as you might hear it, or you have like an idea, or So how far? I suppose it'd be different for each case, but in the most extreme case, how different would those two things be in terms of here's what I think you've asked for in the stem versus all right, this is kind of what I'm feeling, and this is
sometimes pretty different. I try to at least always have that kind of baseline of like I've checked the box of what you sent as a demo, so that if you want that, it's there. But if I hear, it's usually. It might be sonic choices. It might be like I hear the sound of the drums radically different than what's on the demo, or I hear like another layer of stuff. Mm-hmm. That's often the case for me, actually, is that I hear other parts that then I'll say like, use this if you want, don't use it if you don't.
It's very generous of you.
Well, because to me, it becomes
you're taking ownership. I mean, it's generous. I'm just speaking from the point of view of having worked with drummers and other musicians in this case and like in this scenario. And I would be very happy if especially if it's put that way, like use it or not. This is just what I'm hearing, and no hard feelings if you don't. To have that input, especially from someone of your caliber, that's excellent. And I mean, a lot of people would not do that. A lot of people will just play the brief. Here it is. So that's excellent.
Yeah, it's like I don't know what it is. Like maybe it's the
you give a fuck. That's what it is. It's great. That's exactly what it is. And
it's kind of that, but it's also like my ear hears things a certain way. I guess like because of the music I've consumed, or because of like playing in orchestra or whatever. Like sometimes I hear like, oh, this needs to have like this moment needs to have a big concert bass drum, or like. I'm going to put a couple of timpani notes here because I feel like it's going to build up this moment or whatever. Mm-hmm. And if I'm in here, I have all this stuff that I can use. It's harder to do that stuff. Typically, if I'm in a recording studio with people in real life, I'm not doing things like that because usually for most of the things that I find myself doing when people are in a studio together, everyone is very concerned about the time that they're spending on anything. So if we're tracking as a band, it's like, let's get the best take of everyone playing the idea that we've agreed upon as possible. Yep. And do that as efficiently as possible, And that's fine too. Like there is a magic to a band playing in a room, no doubt. And like I will play things that I wouldn't play just sitting here by myself, Yeah. Yeah. But then, like I was saying earlier, like the luxury of being by myself is like if I want to try all the snare drums, or if I want to overdub a big bass drum or something, I can do that stuff. Yeah. In terms of the part being radically different from what has been sent, there's a few things that come to mind. Like usually in my case, it's usually they've programmed something that sounds cool as a programmed element and maybe should stay a programmed element. Oh, right on. And then the drums should do something simpler usually. Because if you've programmed something that's like really, really busy and because, so again, like sometimes someone is programming coming from a place not as a drummer, and so you can hit the keyboard and get all these sounds. You can get the cross stick on the snare drum and the backbeat of the snare drum and a ghost note of the snare drum and a hi-hat. And you can just kind of play them wherever you want. Yeah. But then when you try and actually physically do it on the drum set, it's like, maybe I can learn the notes, but it's not going to sound or feel good. Yeah. Because it's not a natural way to play. If you have your stick laid across the snare drum to play a cross stick, you
There's
can't.
some time that.
Yeah, like it's not instant to get that sound.
Yeah.
So it's usually things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably just, again, like the nature of the stuff that I work on. It's not like, I'm not doing a lot of prog. So there's not like stuff where there's an opportunity for there to be like a huge, drum break or something. It's usually color choices, textures, those kinds of things. The part, most of the time for me, is kind of obvious, like to my ear. I mean, like maybe not related to what they've programmed or sent as a demo, but just like usually the first thing that I hear is what sticks for me, and I kind of get connected to that, and very rarely there'll be a bit of a back and forth, and often when there is, it yields interesting results. Like usually, it doesn't happen very often, but if I have to mine for something, it makes both of us go into a direction that probably neither of us would have gone independently,
Yeah.
But again, that comes back down to communication, because I'm changing sounds, because I'm changing mic positions, I can't really work on anything else until this song is done, right? So if I'm working on a song and I have an idea, I have to send that idea and get it approved before I can move on,
Oh, right.
So it's basically like
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, with mic positions, that's dicey.
Yeah, like it's fine to, like, I can save the template or whatever in the DAW or in the Apollo window or whatever. Like I can get some of the sounds back, but I can't exactly perfectly recreate mic placement or even like drum tuning. Like, and that's just something like even over the course of from the first take to the fifth take, the snare drum might be a little bit lower by the end.
I remember one of the first projects I worked on that actually had like real drums. It was an album from front to back, and the guy that tracked the drums for us, he was like fresh out of sound engineering school, and therefore came along with some of the maybe annoying facets that you get when you're working with somebody like that. But he had one good insight, which was, he would retune the drums like after each song. Because he's like, sometimes you listen to these records in the last song, and Tom sounds so much worse than the first song, and you didn't check the tuning after each song. And I was like, you got that. That stuff really does matter. You're beating away on those drums. Like, that stuff's going to change over time.
Yeah, and in the old days, and like on the higher budget records, there's someone whose job that is.
Yeah.
And I've been that person for some other records too, like that I've not been playing on, that I'm just like the guy that's in charge of like keeping the drums in tune and whatever. But that when you're doing it all yourself, or like in some sort of like, even if it's a collaborative situation with a band in a studio, you're still the drummer and there's no drum tech. You are responsible for that stuff.
And the fatigue alone, is very non-trivial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Like all this talk about different choices, textures, and stuff, leads me to inquire about the variety of projects you find yourself recording in these days. I mean, you've had a long career that's been pretty packed with like stuff. So I think you can talk about, but then there's also just this current COVID time where everybody's been working remotely. So I don't know how far, you can start as far back as you want. In terms of maybe what you have done in terms of the variety of things versus what it's like now. What's the range of projects you're getting at the moment?
Well, thank you for that. It doesn't always feel like a life or a career or whatever packed with stuff, because it's when you're doing it and working, it's like, even if there's like 3 or 4 records that come out in a year that you played on, it's like those might only represent 3 or 4 weeks. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And
I can relate to that feeling. But it's, not to cut you off, but it's a common thing that I experience when I sit down with other people and I kind of like remind them that they've done a bunch of work and they're like, oh, yeah. You know?
Yeah.
And I think we all get that. I mean, I have a much more modest like portfolio, but even that, like, I never thought I would manage to do it. And there's these moments when you're like, wait, I mean, yeah, when did I do this? Like fair enough. It did transpire.
It is nice. It is nice to be able to kind of look back with some detachment at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll just talk about the COVID stuff first because it's fresher in mind.
Yeah.
Like obviously, like you said, there's a pile of stuff, but the stuff in the last year and a half. So last year I was lucky. I had a record that was kind of like being chipped away at, like a kind of a song a month, maybe sometimes 2 songs a month, from the start of things shutting down until the end of the year.
Yeah.
So even though that's not realistically that much work, it was like something to look forward to and count on in each month.
Yeah. That kind of thing really helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of like that also. So I've been recording and engineering stuff for about a decade. I've bought and sold so many things in like, I probably bought more than I needed when I started. I definitely did. And then I kind of like scaled way back. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, I was at a point where I could record drums at home, but not, I would say not at like what I feel is like an appropriate professional level. And so the first thing I did was kind of like change that and just like scrape together enough stuff so that I could just like treat my room, which was made more of a difference than anything, and then like just get a few more mics together and a few more preamps and stuff, and be able to like do a full drum kit properly. So fortunately, having that record to focus on kind of helped me put that stuff together. And then as other things came and went through the year, like other songs, like Vibraphone for, I think this probably is just before pandemic, but like Vibraphone for a Kevin Bright thing that I tracked from home, and then like this David James Allen record is the name of the artist. It's a record called Radiations that came out sometime earlier this year, maybe in January. I can't remember exactly when it came out. And he's actually in Prince Edward County, and we just met doing a gig at the Dakota, which is probably actually the last place I saw you.
I think so, yeah.
Before this. What was it? Oh yeah, it was like a Tom Petty tribute night, and I was in the house band because I play in this cover band sometimes that does like all the music of the Traveling Wilburys and all the like members of that band.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there was a bunch of artists on this thing, and David was one of them, and I can't even remember if I played on the song that he did. I might not have, but he and I just kind of clicked right away, and he stayed in touch. And when he started working on this record, he asked me if I'd be interested in kind of working remotely from home. And like I said, he's not in town; he's in Prince Edward County, so he's sending me stuff, and I'll like. He's been very, very free in like, he's like, whatever you want to do, like. He'll send a sketch of an idea, sometimes not, but he'll just send the song, and I'll send him like maybe 3 or 4 takes that are all different, and like sometimes it's like from the simplest to the busiest, or sometimes it's just like subtly different groove ideas, or sometimes like completely different feels.
That sounds really interesting. I'd like to hear this.
Yeah, and it's that was really the project I think that kind of made me feel like investing properly in recording drums again. Because for a long time, I had been like engineering projects at Hawksley Workman Studio, which used to be up in Berks Falls, Ontario. So like about 3 hours north of Toronto. And so anything that I really wanted to do, if I was producing someone or whatever, we would just go up there on time in times when he was away, because he's very busy and I'm often not involved with whatever he's doing, because I'm only there if it's his band playing shows or sometimes recording. So he was very great at. He would give me a great deal for using his place, and he had a great pile of gear and a bunch of stuff. So I would take people up there and just kind of tuck in for a week or whatever and work on stuff. And so for years I was doing that, and anything I needed to record drums on, I would just do that way. I had a few friends who I could always pop to their studio. Yeah. But at home I had basically like a vocal chain. So if someone wanted to come over and like, if something I'm producing, then, we could do vocals at my house or like overdubs, percussion, stuff like that. But then once the pandemic started and I was working on David's thing, like I said, I just wanted to get legit again and be able to do drums. And so now that I'm in this space, like I did the full length I did, the first full length I did since I've been in here, I got in this space in April. That was like more of a full, like the David Allen stuff is kind of like folk leaning, singer-songwriter, rootsy stuff, which is, again, like I was saying earlier, kind of quieter drums, like very easy to do in an apartment. This record that I did here in April, the first thing I had to do in here, I really had to kind of get used to this space quickly and figure out what I could do in here, because this was much more of a rock record. It's this artist from Alberta called O Stella. Okay, Liz is her name, but the project is O Stella. And the producer, this guy named Devin Lockheed, who produced a record, one of the two records that I played on for an artist called Sky Wallace. And she's in Toronto as well, and Devin's in Toronto. So anyway, that was like a rock record, like, I don't know, whatever, a dozen songs over the course of maybe 2 months. So at the pace that I'm able to work and the pace that they were sending me things, it was pretty busy because, like I said, I can basically only do a song until that song is approved. So there was like some of the references were like, it might be like St. Vincent for this thing, or there were a couple of things that were a little bit more like indie rock, like Broken Social Scene-y kind of vibe. So a bunch of different, like sometimes trying to sound kind of like trashy and industrial, sometimes sounding just kind of, like vibey indie rock drums, like very washy cymbals and things like that. So a bunch of different things to try. So I used a bunch of different drums, a bunch of different mic placements, and it was a really good learning experience for this space. Because like I said when you came in here, it's not like this. I'm very grateful to have this place because it's close to my house and affordable and I can do a lot of what I want to do in here. But like learning those limitations, like, okay, if the CrossFit gym is in session, like that's the time that I have to be done recording before they start dropping weights. Because that will show up in the mics. Interesting. And, so all that stuff, like I had to hit the ground running when I got in here, and now as a result of that, I feel very confident in what I can do. All the things that have come through here since then, which have just been, a song here and a song there, not full records. It's just been way easier and faster to just kind of like we were talking about earlier, just to sort of figure out, okay, what do I feel like I'm probably going to use for this? Like, what's my starting point? Do I want like a resonant kick drum? Do I want a really dead kick drum? How do I get that? Because now it's pretty much like, okay, I know where to put the mics. I know if I need to take down some of the sound treatment, or if I need to put up more, like, all that stuff. And now, like, the most recent thing, I'm working on another project with David Allen, and so he's been sending me a few things like that. I think that'll add up to a record eventually.
Cool.
And that's a kind of, again, like more the thing that he's doing now is with an Irish singer, and that's more like straight up folk.
Okay.
Even less like singer-songwritery pop rock stuff than the last record I did with him. But it's all songs, like I'm not playing on anything that isn't like, melodic and
right.
like, an identifiable structure. Like which is what I think I excel at. I'm not a virtuoso instrumentalist, but what I think I'm good at.
I would disagree with that. I've been watching you play since we were teenagers. That's what. Yeah,
I'm not a virtuoso instrumentalist.
Anybody that's listening, that's the opposite of reality. But maybe the only untrue statement that's been. I can see you cringing, but
yeah,
I've been amazed too many times, and that's sincere. The amount of times I've seen you, I remember just even when we were youngsters, and just like, wow, how did you do that? I didn't know that was a thing you could do. That's totally real. I don't want to make you any more uncomfortable, but
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel like what my strengths are at this point, because probably there's some things I could do when we were kids that I can't do anymore.
Oh yeah, I have some of that as well. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But I think that my strengths are like making moments. Again, back to like what is it that is common to timpani in the orchestra and like drum set in a rock band? Like making moments, shaping a song, like deciding is this part of the tune going to get bigger or smaller? Like how and I've that's feedback that I've gotten from people that I play with too, that I feel really good about, is that some people are like, like, oh, you really know when to give her, like at the end of a song, if it's just, like if we're on the like fourth chorus of the guitar solo or whatever, like it's got to go somewhere new.
Yeah.
And I feel good about like I think it's because of, I'm again, like always striving to play from a place of like, being a listener and not playing from ego, which is a very cliched, trite thing to say, but like it's hard. It's harder than I think people.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
You're not wrong in that it's a cliched, trite thing to say. However, circling back to just the fact that I've known you since we were teenagers, you've always displayed a maturity in your choices. Whenever you're like, I mean, I've seen you playing, in an orchestra pit. I've seen you playing in a rock band, like, long before either of us moved over here, and the choices you would always make in any context you're put in, whatever type of band, an orchestra situation, or whatever the case may be, a jazz combo, whatever. The choices are always, they demonstrated a maturity that I certainly didn't have at that time. I could just see it in the playing, and it's not just me that said that. Like anybody that knows your playing and seeks your work out knows that you're not just a drummer that can go for it and do all this fancy stuff. Like you have a taste, and you have an ear towards the thing you're working on. This is something that I'm consistent throughout the entire time I've known you.
Man, you're being too kind.
No. This is trust me. This is all not just is that sincere, but I know for a fact that other people will agree with me. Anybody that has had any experience, whether it's working with you or watching you play. But that brings me to this other thing that I almost kind of forgot to ask you about. But I mean, you're a producer also. You mentioned producing, and so all of this stuff that I just mentioned, playing for the song, playing without ego, really doing what's best for the project or the piece you're working on. That is very much how a producer is required to think. I mean, it's great if the drummer that you hire is thinking that way as well. It's a huge bonus. But you think like that anyway, and you are in fact a producer. So can you talk a bit more about maybe some of the things you produced and kind of a bit about that just generally? Yeah.
Again, I'll thank you for your extreme kindness before I do that.
It's not. There's no kindness involved. I'm just stating factual things based on the empirical record.
You might call it maturity. I think I was a little bit. I think I was just like an old man when I was born and had a little. Like I think I grew into my personality sometime around 2012.
Yeah. Okay. There you
go. I think there's a natural connection because if you're a recording drummer, you're kind of you have so much control over the vibe that you're already halfway to being a producer if you have taste. A friend of mine had a great line that I think is apt to. I can't remember who said it to him, but another great drummer, Adam Warner, who lived in Toronto for a long time. I think he's moved to Winnipeg, but he told me, "I don't respect talent. I respect taste." And it's like, I absolutely, I agree. Yep. So, yeah, the things I've produced. It's been a while since I would say that I feel like I've done anything that I would call like myself the producer on. But the things that there are some albums out that have my name in that capacity. There's this guy in town, Bryce Jardine, cool songwriter, and we made.
When you say in town, which town are you referring to?
Oh, sorry. Fair question. Toronto. He's from Ontario.
Right.
And I was playing with him off and on. He had like a monthly residency gig at one of the places in town here in Toronto, and he had made a record that had some really cool songs on it, and like very talk. So he's younger than me, and very much like mature. Like thinking about and like working on the craft of songwriting at a level, at like in a way that and speaking about it in a way like almost in a, and I don't mean this in any way as a negative thing because I can see how with some of the things I've said that this might sound that way, but like almost in like an academic sense, like he's like studied in like song, like he can talk about like the choices that Fred Eaglesmith made on this record about like very very
I've encountered people like this as well, and it's like a interesting counterpoint to like I immersed myself in trying to learn everything about the music production process somehow except that like that's the blind spot, right? The songwriting part and realizing that there's so much depth just in that thing of songwriting as there is in all of music production, just the way you design a song. If you want to get academic about it, you can use those kind of words, the way you physically put it together, the different ways that can be done, whether it's the overarching structure or what you're doing with the lyricism to it's a huge bucket. A lot of depth there. You were saying.
So I kind of I produced an EP, a 6-song EP for him called Lean Years that came out maybe 5 years ago. And that's probably not the most recent thing, but that's definitely one of the things that I feel like the most proud of. I listened to it recently and I'm like, I also I mixed that. I produced it, mixed it, and played a bunch of stuff on it, and I feel really good about that, and I think it holds up. And it, unfortunately, hasn't found a wide audience. I would say, I would like for him to get more ears on that thing, but the that's all too common a story.
Yep.
You know,
for sure.
So I think that we'll probably do some more stuff together at some point. Like there's 2 other songs of his that I produced that were kind of half finished a few years after that one, and then we were supposed to. I had a studio, like a band studio session booked with him at the beginning of 2020 that obviously never happened, and so at some point I think we'll get back to doing something. But that's a thing that I feel really good about. And then there's also like a couple of the second Gramercy Riffs record, of which there are only 2. I had nothing to do with the first one. But
I was waiting which one of us would mention that band first.
Yeah. So I'd made 2 records with Mara from Gramercy Riffs. One was the second Gramercy Riffs record, and then there was a project of hers called Wonder Strands, which was actually that's like me learning how to work in a studio, because it was started right after that Hawksley Christmas record that I was talking about, and so I was
all those things you just mentioned sound like they are lighting up light bulbs in my brain from around that era. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's fun to follow someone's story like in the way that I guess I've managed to follow yours, and then kind of have you fill it all in years later.
Well, you were around then too. Like you were probably at a lot of those Gramercy Riff shows.
I was. Well, I would have been in and out because in St. John's times, like I guess I was living in Scotland for a bit. Then I moved to Toronto, and I've been isolated in the East End forever. My next EP, my next beat tape is going to be called "Nobody Ever Comes to VP" because that's it. But I was. I've been around and certainly. And I remember the Wonder Strands. I recollect a show. I think could be the Horseshoe, where you briefly got up on stage with a guitar.
Yeah. So we made the Wonder Strands record, and Hawksley got involved, and he played drums on some of the records. So we played live a few times where I was not playing drums. I was playing guitar, because I did play a bunch of guitar and bass on that record. And then after that, but that record is also a lot of just Mara's home recordings, like her singing into her laptop. So it's a very weird kind of lo-fi, noisy record. Like if you listen to it, you would go, "This guy doesn't know how to record anything." But that was there's
a lot of really awesome records like that. Frankly,
it was very intentional.
Yeah.
Like we just took her home recordings and kind of layered on top of them, because they were these weird little special things. They still resonate with me quite a lot. And then the Gramercy Riffs Desire Trails record was made around the same time, 2012 or 13, somewhere in there. And that's more just like straight up, like kind of rock pop band. And I think Lee really produced that record. He was the person who had the kind of clearest vision on everything. But I mixed it, and so I played a lot of instruments on it. So it kind of like him. I hope that I helped him get to where he wanted to get with that one.
Yeah.
I still really like that one too. It's something I am hungry to do again. Is because there is kind of when you first came in and we started talking, like like I said, I don't have the compulsion to make a solo record, but I love just like
I was just going to ask you this.
Making
records. My next question, because I alluded to your taste, the fact that you make really good choices when you're behind the kit, or whether you're behind the boards, as they say. To refer to producers, even though I don't know what boards we're behind often. But you have this discerning taste, and you're like a creative spark. Like it's not just like I feel confident if I gave you like a stem of a drum idea, you would not only play that drum idea extremely well, but you would have some interest, as we've spoken about. You'd have some imaginative and creative input that would be appreciated. And so you obviously have the creative spark, but you, like you said, you never really felt the compunction, compelled, whatever. I don't know what that word is.
Compulsion?
I shouldn't go compulsion. Yeah, I don't know. I shouldn't just be so cavalier with these words. But you never felt the compulsion to make a solo record or anything like that. But you obviously are extremely creative, and so I personally recently have been working with prompts. I was starting to learn some Adobe Illustrator, these types of softwares, and just for fun and to get the brain going and to just practice being a creative person, because that skill can atrophy. And if you're not creative,
big time.
And if you're not creative, you can also develop the skill simply by doing.
Yep.
Right. And so I've been using prompts, and it makes me think of how, everything is really a prompt, right? Like, if you're a producer, then your client is one big prompt. So similarly, just because you haven't made a solo record or you don't feel the need to, it doesn't mean that you're like, you're doing the same exact thing. So you brought it up on your own. I was going to ask you anyway, and here it is. I've asked you. Can you speak more about that? This sort of, I don't know how you would describe it, but yeah, this disconnect between, hey, like you said, you could easily make a solo record. You have all the means, you got all the skills and all that, and the creativity. So can you just maybe talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I guess. I won't rule it out. Like maybe it may yet happen.
We'll get a record.
Yeah. There's something really exciting about just like being given that initial idea from someone else, like whether it's Bryce or Mara or whoever, like someone like, and even anyone that I track drums for, like getting to hear something that's just been written, especially when someone doesn't have a clear vision for like how to treat it. Because I can just hear a million things right away. And
has it always been like that?
Kind of. I feel like I sometimes feel like I definitely don't hear things on the drums in the way that I used to when I was a kid, but I think that's just like, that's normal. But I can hear like band ideas and often things like that I can't play myself, that I have to, get someone else to do, because I don't have the skill, like, particularly on piano. I'm a terrible piano player. But, like, I might hear like, oh, I know exactly what this needs. This needs like right hand descending octave, like scale-based thing, like going into the chorus, like whatever it is. Like I can hear, I can hear the finished thing pretty quickly, or a version of the finished thing.
You're a producer that just happens to be a drummer, it seems.
Maybe.
Yeah, to me, it explains what I was getting at earlier. Like, at a younger age than anyone else I know from our cohort, you've just made stronger musical choices. And even though you always could have gone the show-offy route, you almost always, if not always, have erred on the side of taste.
Not when we were young.
From my perspective as someone in your age cohort,
Okay,
I'm talking about at every level every time we've been. I'm not saying you're not some superhuman, although you should see this guy on drums. It really does seem that way. But I just mean relationally, right? Like, as a guy that knows you and sees you doing what you're doing, whenever we'd see you execute anything, it would just be like, man, some extra bit of class going on there. What is that? What is that? Like we could never, it's like something that, hopefully we're always trying to bridge that gap. But that's really what I mean, is that you've always had that sense, I think.
Yeah, I think. Again, thank you. If I think I would give credit to my dad's record collection. My dad was a big record nerd when I was a kid, and still loves listening to music. And the only thing that he ever wants me to buy him is music. He is a bit of a Luddite, doesn't do any streaming. He still likes getting CDs at Christmas. But he always had he had a huge vinyl collection. We were very late to get a CD player, but he had a bunch of mixtapes. And then we did eventually get a CD player, and he and I both joined up the 11 CDs for a penny or whatever, and there was a lot of music in the house, and a lot of non-judgmental consumption of music, I would say.
That's a big thing you just said.
Yeah.
Early on, that non-judgmental consumption, big one.
Yeah, because there were things that he liked that I didn't like, and there were things that I liked that appalled him. But it was we could always meet in the middle somehow, and it's funny, the older that I get, my taste has gravitated more back towards the things that I grew up listening to from his record collection. But it's it's just I was doing that so much first because my parents are not musical. Neither of them are musicians. There was no, and I didn't start. I guess I played saxophone as a first instrument, like everybody's first instrument, when I was in grade 4 or something for a while, and I sucked at it. And then I joined a community band, and I started. I got really, I was always turning around looking at the percussion section, and that's how I ended up playing drums in the beginning. But before all of that, I was just listening to music. I was just always, there was always music on. There was when I was a kid, real small, maybe this story has a dark turn, but I guess it's not that bad. I just remember playing the Bobby McFerrin "Don't Worry, Be Happy" 45 so much at my house that I think it drove my mom insane. And one day I just went looking for it, and it was not there.
Very dark.
Yeah,
very dark.
Yeah, and it was just never spoken of. But she never told me to not listen to I was never discouraged from listening to music. It was just mysteriously that
one song.
I guess that one song which I can.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
gotta have that one. So went too far on that, Bobby McFerrin. Before I forget, I want to know just some favorites and influences of yours. First of all, just because we're speaking about music and you kind of having judgment outside the context of being a drummer and being able to think of the big picture. If we just forget about specifically drums, favorite sort of artists, bands, influences that you can think of that had a big influence on you as a producer or musician.
Yeah, God, there's so many. Okay, to not talk about drums and just talk about songs and emotional impact. Nick Cave. I am a huge Nick Cave fanatic. I have there's a handful of artists who anytime they put out a record, I'm gonna buy it, and he's one of them. And my favorite live show I've ever seen is Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and definitely not an influence. He has cool musicians playing with him, but I'm not influenced by his drummers. I'm influenced by him as an entity. Yeah, and a weird, mysterious human being who seems to be able to dip into something otherworldly to me.
Good. That's exactly what I wanted out of that question. And so I specifically said separate from drumming because any more that it would say at a philosophical level almost, or in the way that you describe Nick Cave.
Yeah, I have the similar kind of long-term connection with Radiohead.
Second that motion for sure.
That tune "Let Down" on OK Computer is
I'd just been getting back into that tune that comes back up again and again.
And there's so many things to. There's so many layers to that song.
Those beeps at the end, those beepy boopy things at the end. I can't even.
That is a sublime piece of music to me, and from a technical standpoint, there's so many. I could yeah, I could go on and on. But
A+ full marks.
yes,
Yeah,
that one is a big one.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no bigger cliche than to cite OK Computer as a production touchstone. But
for me, it's Hail to the Thief. Weirdly,
oh yeah,
yeah, like that had a Hail to the Thief was the first time. Again, I never had any access to any like studio or anything, and so you know how like when you, our mutual friend Mike Lahi.
yeah.
I remember the first time he bought a whammy pedal. And he knew exactly how to use it.
Yeah.
Like day one, he just knew how to use it. And I was like, dude, what, this is awesome. He's like, and he told me, I've been practicing in my mind how to use this thing for years. and
I'm very in touch with that.
Yeah. So it's like a Radiohead was that Hail to the Thief. Before I ever really got the chance to mix anything proper, like, whatever the hell that means, because it's been a gradient to get to where I am now. But, the realizing the importance of room mics, and stereo reverb, and how one would even apply such things before having the way to test it out in front of me in a DAW or whatever.
Yeah.
That Hail to the Thief album was the first one where I was like, oh yeah, like everything should be getting routed to the same reverb.
Yeah.
And the reverb should be in stereo, which is an obvious thing you learn at some point. That was the...
oh, man, I used to do reverbs on inserts when I was starting.
Yeah, everyone starts...
How do you know?
Exactly.
And then...
But that was the record where I was like, the space sounds... Like, I all of a sudden became aware that it sounded like it was all in the same space. And pretty much since listening to that record, in St. John's,
Yeah.
before I ever moved over here, the main goal, no matter what record I'm making, is whether it's like some weird electronic stuff or a rock band or whatever, how do I make it feel like this all lives together?
A great engineer here in Toronto, a friend of mine, Braden Sauter, he hipped me recently to the fact that a bunch of like my favorite sounding records are all made in the same studio. That record and the Beck Sea Change record and
another great record.
Blake Mills' Hi Ho were all made in the same studio in LA. If I were as big a nerd as him, I would tell you which one, but I can't remember which one.
Okay.
But those are three fantastic sounding records, and that Hail to the Thief. I've tried and failed many times to like make drums sound like they're there. Like I've. It's an underrated record, I guess, in their catalog because it's like not one of the ones that people frequently talk about.
That's why I kind of almost pointed out as one of my favorites of theirs.
Yeah,
it just kind of happened to be like in my life story, the point at which I like committed to being a Radiohead fan coincided with that record coming out, and that thing I just mentioned about like it was one of those first records that made me really realize the space and the three-dimensionality of it. So then by the time I actually got to have live drums and live instruments to work with, I always had this idea in my mind of how I'm going to try to get this sense of space. So it's really cool that you brought up. Bringing up Radiohead is fair enough because so many people bring it up, but bringing up Let Down, that was always just constantly rediscovering that sound. And just as an engineer, Hail to the Thief is a big one for me. Now going to drums. I want to ask you like your favorite drummers, or but also because you record yourself. I want to maybe have some idea of what you think are some really good drum recordings that you can point towards. You're like, that's a sick old drum recording right there.
Well, that Blake Mills record again, Hi Ho, Jim Keltner, who would definitely be near the top of my list of favorite drummers, plays on there, and that's a beautiful sounding record, and the drums sound amazing. Another favorite. There's a song on the last Roy Orbison record that Jim Keltner played on called She's a Mystery to Me. And it's a weird... Jim Keltner always makes weird choices. Like he's playing like a bongo or a rototom or something in one hand and these big, beautiful backbeats on a floor tom. And that drum part is something that I'm obsessed with, and the sound of the drums in that recording is something I'm pretty obsessed with. Okay, let me compartmentalize a little bit. I'll do drummers and then I'll do drum recordings.
Okay,
I'll try and do it that way. I mean, God, there's so many. I mean, of people that I'm really excited about at the moment. I mean, obviously, Nate Smith.
Man, that's
like,
awesome. Yeah.
Just like, how do you? So talk about like expression, just as like an instrumentalist. Like that guy can change the mood of a room immediately, and the pure joy that can come from the way that he plays the drums, man. It is. I've never seen him play live, and I very much want to be in the room when he is doing what he does. Because man, like even just watching it on YouTube or listening to him on a record, it's electric.
It really is. Yeah.
And I feel the same way about Brian Blade, who I have seen live, and like he has that thing. Like he totally changes the energy. I saw him play at Massey Hall with Daniel Lanois years ago. I'd like to see him play like on a jazz gig and really kind of go out a little bit further. But I mean I listen to him all the time. Always makes beautiful musical choices and makes very special moments. When I was a kid, I was like a Steve Gadd fanatic, as like many drum nerds. I'm going to say were, because I don't think drum nerds like that exist very commonly now.
Well, so you said Steve Gadd.
Yeah.
And so the reason that I know Steve Gadd is just my brief encounter with some drum instruction. When I was trying to figure out my double technique for the pedal.
Yeah.
And I believe it was Mr. Richard Spurl who suggested to me heel toe instead of the other way around or whatever it is. Just different words for that other technique. And Steve Gadd was a tap dancer or something like that.
That's right.
That's the story behind that. But whenever I hear Steve, and I still, like the rare moments when I try to play drums, I still go for that heel toe.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What are you doing for your doubles?
I do that. I will also do the slide thing.
You'll mix it up.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends. I am very guilty of not thinking about technique very much.
It's good to know, actually. Yeah.
Sometimes
that's how it should be, I suppose. You spend the time focused on technique, and then you move past it, and you're in like a second naivete.
I could do for a brush up. I think it maybe sometimes to my detriment, but I think about it enough that I'm very much trying to not do anything that is bad for my body, and so I've taken a bunch of lessons recently and like checked into like Alexander technique as it relates to the drums and stuff. I sit a lot higher than I used to. Anyway, getting away from.
I'm going to look that up. Alexander technique.
Yeah, it's a whole like body use ethos that is something that's taught to like string players and singers for how to use their body well, but it seems like no one has connected the dots to how it should relate to the drums,
even though it's like using every part of your body.
Exactly, and this teacher in LA, Dave Elich, who's played with a bunch of people. He was one of the drummers over the course of the Mars Volta, and he was. I had a lesson with him in Toronto. I think he was here with Miley Cyrus or something. Like he's an LA dude, but he's a great teacher, and he did a series of classes over Zoom in the last year with an Alexander technique teacher, and that's something I wanted to dive further into. And it's a lot about posture and like being aware of where tension is in your body and how to release it. I am by no means expert in that, but I would recommend that anyone go and check out Dave's teaching if they have concerns.
I appreciate you mentioning it. I mean, we're getting to that age where you start, if you don't do these types of things, you start to feel something weird in some joint, and it's like, man, I can't play insert thing I used to be able to play. So yeah, Alexander Technique. We've got it recorded in podcast form, so I can refer to it afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
What were we talking? Oh, drummers. Yeah. I mean, and all the like classic, like LA session, like the Jim Gordon, Jeff Porcaro, all of the like Hal Blaine, Wrecking Crew, like all of those kind of classic record making studio musicians, like had a big impact on me. Because again, like going back to like just even before I played an instrument, looking at my dad's records, and I'd look at like 3 or 4 records, and they'd all have the same names on them, and figure out like, oh, there's a handful of people that make this music that
I miss doing that as well. Like you can still Google it and stuff, but the opening up that insert and like looking for the names, I would do the same thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's exciting.
Yeah. That's how you assemble your list of favorite musicians. You have it in your mind. When someone asks me, my favorite bass player is such and such, because you read those damn inserts, right? Yeah.
So yeah, those are a bunch. I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting.
Overrated drummer. Just so we get a little bit of throwing shade. Can you think of an overrated, like a celebrated somebody that is maybe?
Oh, I mean, if you get something out of it, like I don't want to be a total hater. So like obviously to each their own, but are Metallica a great band? Yes. Can Lars play the drums? Fuck no. Like maybe could he at one point? Yeah, probably. Yeah. But like, man, like the live stuff I've seen of them, like, and I have not gone to see them live, but live footage I've seen of them in recent years is like, fuck, it's hurting, man. Like,
it's funny that you say that because like I woke up this morning, I opened up my Instagram, which you shouldn't do in the morning, but there you go. This is what I'm doing, and I was scrolling through as you do, and I see an ad pop up. So guess who has the latest masterclass
on how to be a band?
On how to be a band.
I know.
I was like, because I'm looking through this thing, and I'm like, what are these guys even going on about now? What is this masterclass going to even be about?
Are you guys going to go and destroy every copy of some kind of monster? Because what that shows about you guys being a band is not something that I want to learn. Bunch of baby men.
I had to sit down and watch the whole ad. I just couldn't, because it's like peak 2021. Yeah. Like it's like a bunch of like it's Metallica. And looking like a bunch of dads saying all this like positive stuff about how to get along and work together, which is like fair enough, I suppose, right? Like it does make sense, but you just think back to when Metallica was on the go, right? Like on the go, and you just try and imagine yourself projecting into the future about some reality where this is a thing that's going to happen. And there it is, Metallica. And I was waiting for something to show up that would indicate that it was a joke, because I saw a couple of years ago the Black Keys did you see this?
No.
The Black Keys did a fake an ad that was like they were going to do a masterclass, and it was just the two of them just acting like a bunch of fools for the duration of this fake ad. And I was like, oh, this is going to be like that. Let's hope. I mean,
yeah, you would think.
Yeah, but no, it's deadly serious. There you go. That's a good bit of shade for like the podcast.
I mean, that's low hanging fruit. That's an easy
one. True. You
know?
Want to go for a little bit of a more ambitious choice?
No, that's all right. That's all right. I'm all about the positive vibes these days.
Fair enough. Okay, last thing I wanted to ask you about. I have no idea how long we've been talking, because you're the sound guy. So it's you're.
Oh wow, this is really long.
So how long are we doing? What do we got?
2:50.
That's fine. That's fine. We got that's why we're here. It's been long enough since we sat down and had a chat.
You can chop that up.
I'll get these chair squeaking noise out of there. Hopefully, at McKee's and all that stuff. But one maybe last thing I wanted to ask you about, unless I think of something else. When we were setting up, when I came in here, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, sense of community or lack thereof. You mentioned in the classical music scene how there's some obstacles towards that, and we both come from St. John's, Newfoundland, and the time that we were in St. John's, when we were you'd go to what is it, Junctions, used to be called McMurdo's, these old venues, and man, there was a sense of community. And I was not even in the scene. I was just a guy that would go to shows and was friends with people. And I felt like, wow, what a community. And we come to Toronto, and as expected, as the reputation proceeds, it becomes a lot more atomized, a lot more isolated. And part of that you expect is just moving to a big cosmopolitan city. But then I love Toronto, don't even get me wrong, but Toronto does have a bit of this reputation. And then, more recently, after moving to India, moving to Bombay, big bad city, population of Australia. But in the music community that I've accidentally fallen into over there, I've found a tremendous sense of community, varying as over time. And so it makes me wonder maybe about your thoughts about that, your experiences with that. Is it something you've given much thought to? And do you like? It sounds like the obvious answer is more community equals better, but is there a level at which it maybe doesn't matter, or you wouldn't care? I mean, do you have any kind of?
Yeah. Can I ask you a question before I answer that?
Absolutely.
I'm very curious. We come from the same place. We grew up in St. John's, and we moved to Toronto, which is a astronomically bigger city than St. John's.
Correct.
And then you moved and lived in Mumbai and Bombay, which is like incredible population density.
Yes.
How does that kind of stuff affect you? Do you care about, or do you, positive or negative, are you impacted by like the sheer number of people around you at any given time?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you remember this from when we lived in St. John's, but when we were at MUN and when you were busy studying music and I was doing a math degree, I would study in the food court of the Avalon Mall. I was weird for that. Like I was pretty much the only guy that was in the food court of the Avalon Mall by the Tim Hortons with a stack of CDs studying, and I would be there for hours. And I have always felt safer with ambient noise of people. It's the reason why, I lived across the street from the Avalon Mall, so it was an easy choice. It was just, across the street, but I wouldn't have been able to study in the library.
Right.
And I will tell you, I'm a weird DIY producer, and I break all the rules of producing or doing this thing properly. But even stuff that I don't think I should admit in terms of what you're talking about just having, people around. Like I will listen to podcasts while I'm mixing. I will listen to podcasts while I'm writing music because I don't like silence. I feel it's not even silence. I don't like the aloneness.
Wow.
And since I was a kid, my mom would take me to Bombay regularly, once every year, then once every 2 years, and we would spend a good amount of time there. So I got used to that feeling of density. And growing up next to the Avalon Mall, I was born a mall rat. Friends would come over to my house. I would never go to their house, but friends come. We'd go walk around the mall.
Yeah.
And that of people just around makes me feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more safe. And I'll tell you, the first time I came back to visit Toronto after moving to Bombay, I was really surprised at how few people there are in the city. You're walking down the financial district, and I mean, it's fair enough. It's cold outside, everybody's in the path, but it's the downtown of the major metropolitan city, and there's no one around. You don't hear anything now. In Bombay, it's just constant, and the feeling of it. And sometimes there are a lot of annoyances and problems that come around with that level of population density. But there's sometimes it's not even a positive or negative, but the feeling is so different.
Of course, yeah.
If you came to visit me in Bombay, there'd be times when we'd be driving by maybe some highway or flyover, and you look at the number of buildings, all high-rise buildings or not tall buildings, tenement or high, whatever. And you can see through the windows, and it's just there's so many people packed in here. The whole city feels like it's breathing.
Yeah.
I like that feeling. I don't, but initially I would have just chalked it up to I like crowds and all this stuff. But what I've like, I always assumed that I wouldn't like the country, the countryside or going out to the cabin. That was not part of my life, right?
Right.
What I realize is that I actually love nature and I love the country. What I don't like is that weird in-between middle bit between the city and the country known as the suburbs.
Yeah.
That's the part that really freaks me out. And being born in North America, we have the most poorly designed suburbs in the world. Like they're just, and to tie back to what I asked you, that adds to this feeling of isolation.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't know if I've
in.
said it on my podcast already, but these cul-de-sacs where like, if you want to get to the Walmart that's like clearly like 5-minute walk beeline from your house, but there's a fence there. And then you got to get in your car, get on some 8-lane monstrosity of like, if you live in Brampton or one of these places.
Yeah.
20 minutes later, show up at the shopping plaza that's like 5 minutes away from your house. Like, come on, right? So that stuff actually is maddening and crazy to me. And no, but I don't think it's just me. I think it's like
No, I don't think so.
I think it's driving everybody crazy whether you realize it or not. Because like that's like a radically like how we're not supposed to be. Like we're not getting any of the things as human beings. We're not getting the community part of being around each other. We're also not getting the nature, the like you have to like look at green things for your eyes to be healthy. Like you need to look at long spaces. Otherwise you're like, we're not getting that. And we're not getting the togetherness and feeling that you would get if you lived, at Dundas and Ossington or wherever the case may be. So, I like people. I try to fight. People say, they'll say to me, "You're an extrovert." That's what's the thing with you is you're an extrovert. I'm like, first of all, that's a stupid binary. This extrovert introvert thing is dumb. There's plenty of times when I'm like very introverted, but I will sometimes have to maybe give into it a little bit. I do like having people around. Like we were talking about my space that I have in the East End. It's too much space. I'm one guy. I would get so much more work done if there was some other person in the other room in a laptop doing their own thing. And, like every, 40 minutes, like, how are you doing? You want a cup of coffee? That makes me feel safe and comfortable and, without digressing too much further or getting too much. I'm an only child, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm an only child. I grew up in an immigrant family on Thorburn Road.
Yeah.
If you're from St. John's and you know that I grew up on Thorburn Road across the street from the Avalon Mall, at that time there were no young people on that street. All my neighbors were elderly.
Yeah.
I was also like a weird odd duck in the Indian community. My parents are an extra generation older than me in addition to a cultural difference, no brothers and sisters. So like I'm always looking for siblings.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to make somebody, if I have a good rapport with somebody, and this applies to our work, like it's hard for me to make a record with somebody without developing a strong interpersonal relationship with them.
Yeah.
And like people don't have to go too far out of their way to help me out before I start viewing them as family for that reason. And, all of that, in a city like Bombay where you have that much more people, we live in one of the most individualist places in the world, in the most individualist time in history, right?
Yeah.
If you live in a place with that many people, there's a bit stronger feeling of community. I'm happy, because I'm fortunate in a lot of other ways, but in this way, like that's why I love this podcast. Like what we were just saying, we've known each other since time before, not worth mentioning in either of our, whatever, you know what I mean? And we can come, like this podcast works as such a good excuse for us to talk.
Yeah.
Like when have we ever done this? Right. But there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Like there's so much to connect over. And yet we don't think to do this simple thing. And that's one of the things I've learned from doing this podcast, because the first set of people you reach out to is, people and you're like, we could have been having chats like this the whole time. That kind of thing, right? So yeah, I mean, long-winded way. I like of answering your question. I like crowded places, but I like a good, mountain view with nobody around as well. Just don't stick me in those suburbs, man.
Yeah.
Don't stick me in Cowan Heights.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have had, like friends from Toronto go to St. John's in the summertime, and although this wouldn't be true when I was just there this summer, because they've St. John's actually feels very different than it used to. I don't know, when were you last there?
I was last there in end of 2016.
Oh wow, it feels like they did this like pedestrian mall thing downtown this summer and like I think last summer, and it actually feels a lot more alive than it did when I was there. Like, and like that's not to take away like the thing that you're talking about like community, because I still have more of a sense of community amongst my friends that are still in St. John's than I would say that exists in Toronto. And I'll speak to that in a sec. But like there is people, like I've known people from Toronto who go to visit St. John's and are walking downtown at night and they're like, where are the people? What, like, this is scary. Like it's a ghost town.
Yeah.
And I think it's that thing that you like you said, you feel safer in like with people around. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I feel very comfortable in Toronto, but I like living over here. Like I like living I want to be on the subway line. I want to be close to stuff, but I don't want to be like downtown. You know, like I want to be able to like, I've got just enough Bayman in me that I want to be able to like open a door to the outside right now. Like I don't want to get in an elevator. But that definitely, so I like to get back to your original question about community. Do I feel like I'm a part of a community in Toronto? No. Like, I have friends. I have friends that I play music with. I have friends that I don't play music with. But like, it's so like it feels pretty fragmented and very cliquey. Like the thing when I moved here, which was like spur of the moment decision. I knew that I had to leave St. John's, and I knew that Toronto was probably going to be the goal. But like my decision to come here was was made very quickly, and I had a huge chip on my shoulder and was afforded like way too much confidence by excelling at something in a small place. And so I came here and got my ass kicked as I needed to have happen, like by like going out and seeing people who are better than me and playing with people who are better than me, which elevates you. Yep. All very good, necessary things. And at the same time, like, and that's happening, but I'm also realizing, there's also like tons of shitty musicians in Toronto who play and who get work because they're friends with whoever or whatever. Like any sense of a scene, it's like, you know, maybe if you grew up in Toronto and you went to like a Etobicoke School of the Arts or something, and you have this like people that you've known since you were like as long as we've known each other, and you still see them, and you're in it and doing it. Like, I guess there's certain like there are scenes like there you can go to a bar and be part of like, you know, like whatever, like this cover band plays at whatever, like the Orbit Room that doesn't exist anymore or whatever.
Yeah, it's
like,
been a minute since I heard that.
Yeah, like you go there and watch this band and do blow and whatever. Like
that's the scene. Yeah, scene, ladies and gentlemen. We got a great scene over here. The band is doing blow in the back. It's a great scene. That's what you need.
I'm you know, not hashtag not all bands, but it was. I've never like identified. I'm not very good at socializing. I've never been good at like the schmoozy kind of thing. So it's hard. Like, I like going to shows and I'll go and watch a show, but like I'm not the guy that's like there till the bar closes and like hanging out and talking to the band after and stuff. And like I know that works for people and like makes them feel connected, but that's not. I don't know. Like, it just doesn't appeal to me. It's not. It doesn't come naturally to me. It almost doesn't even occur to me. Like, I want to go to a show and enjoy the music and like maybe chat with some people, maybe not, and then I want to go home. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, fair enough.
And like so maybe I am a contributing factor to not feeling like there's a scene, but I also. I've tried, like there have been times in my life when because I've been here a long time now. I've been here 15 years basically. And, I I've tried the like going out every night and like watching the band and like hanging out and doing the thing and I'm talking about like there are people that I really love and respect who I'm going to see and going to hang out with, and I still feel like an outsider, and maybe that's just like me and my nature, like my personality.
You still feel
type.
like an outsider?
Oh yeah.
Wow, you've been here for ages, and you're killing it. How that's the thing that I wanted to maybe pick your brain a little bit further on before I let you go. Although if you have to bounce, just let me know.
No, we're all good.
But it's like, so I mean, there's an aspect of this you mentioned where it's like, look, I mean, I like to go to a show, maybe I want to talk to a few people, maybe I don't. I want to go home. As we get older, certainly relate to the getting home part. You're going to be a dad soon, going to need to get home.
Yeah.
All of those things, but it like, is there some and as much as that's your temperament and that's fine, and you don't need to or want to be the guy that's in the bar till the end, do you feel like, because in order for a scene to exist, not everybody needs to do that. Like, in a scene, there still needs to be a guy like you that's gonna do exactly what you just said, which is not stick around till the end and not schmooze and all that stuff, right? And I hate schmoozing as much as the next person, but do you, regardless of that being your temperament, do you feel like, and maybe after me pointing it out or something, or even just comparing it to your time in St. John's, like, do you feel like there is a lack of something because of that? Like, do you think we would be better off if there was some sense of community, and or is there a sense of community that I just can't see, or I'm just not visible?
So let me give you a concrete example of what and it might be like just Toronto's nature of like, Toronto's a very unsentimental place. It is, it eats its own, and like how many buildings has Toronto torn down? Like, Toronto is not sentimental. It's just a weird mishmash of a place.
It's a well put observation.
Thank you. So here's a concrete example of a time when I thought I was in a community and thought I was building community. And I'm not going to name anybody because I don't have any ill will, but it was just at the end of it, I was like, huh. So there was some drummers, and we would get together and like do exercises on a pad together. And some of these people I didn't know. One of these people, the guy who kind of invited me, I thought I knew a little bit. Also, like, moved to Toronto, kind of similar story to myself. From elsewhere, moved here. Had a pretty good like touring gig and like was just doing stuff locally. So like very similar to myself, similar age. And so we'd get together and hang and do pad work and just do some exercises and kind of to be accountable to each other. And I felt really good about it. And I thought I was like getting to know this guy a little bit better. And again, like, I have no ill will. It's just like this, it goes how it goes. But, he's a great drummer. I asked him to sub for me a day of teaching because I have at the time I can't remember how many students I had or what day it was. It doesn't matter. But like, I needed a sub last minute to teach a day in at the school that I was teaching at, which was like in Woodbridge. So a little bit out of the way, but like, this guy has a car, I have a car, not a big deal. And I needed coverage because I got a call to go do like one of those NPR Tiny Desk concerts.
Oh yeah.
With a great artist whose record I played on named Kaya Cater, banjo player, very smart songwriter. Anyway, that's beside the point. And so I called this guy. I was like, "Hey, like, I know you teach. Can you sub for me on this thing?" And he said, "Sure." And like my teaching schedule was a little bit in flux at the moment, and so it was a little bit less than, like, it wasn't a full night. It was, but I was like, I'll make sure it's at least $100. Like, if you don't earn $100, I'll top you up or whatever.
Yeah.
And he said fine. And then like the day I was getting on the plane, he was like, man, I think it needs to be 150. I just can't. I can't.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, huh. like, because he's going to get paid by the school, so he transparently knows how much the school is paying him, which was like whatever it was, like $75. So you are taking $75 out of my pocket, and are you helping me out? Absolutely, but you've just told me that we're not friends.
Yeah,
because I was asking you to do me to work for me, but also to do me a favor, and so. That just bummed me out. And I was kind of like, fuck, like that's what it is. And I get it. It's expensive. Like it's hard to be here. It's hard work.
Yeah.
But are you telling me that you don't leave the house for $100? You only leave the house for $150? Yeah. Come on. Like like I don't believe you.
And I mean, like also the opportunity that you were leaving for, like to play at a tiny desk, because that's a big deal. Like a fellow musician should understand, like, hey, like this is a pretty big opportunity for me, just as a thing to put on the old CV, hey, bye, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, but what's interesting about what you just said is that so many people have a story like that. I didn't mean to cut you off if you weren't finished that story, by the way.
No, that's basically the end.
Yeah, but like that's a common story in any. Well, certainly in our field, but when people are trying to build community, we run into these situations. I had very much given up on the notion of this being a possibility until I moved to India, and it wasn't really through any of my own effort. It was just the fluke of the people that I met that made me feel that way. And then I was like, wait, this is different but familiar from when I was in St. John's, except now I'm, and it's something that's really stark. Whenever I come back to this part of the world, but then Toronto, right? Like I feel like this, like North America is just kind of like that anyway, and then Toronto is an extreme example.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting description, Toronto being unsentimental like that. I think you're very, very right. Something I should keep in my cap. As man, I reckon we could keep talking for ages, but we got to cut it somewhere. It's been great chatting with you. We'll do it again sometime, I reckon, if we can.
Mike's or no?